Hello, everybody. It's Heather with the Leadership Heart podcast. And today I am delighted to talk to Peter Carlson. And he came to me, most of the time people are either referred to me or I find them by just looking at LinkedIn and seeing some amazing stories that are out there. But in this case, somebody reached out to me and said, I think I've listened to your show and I really think this person would be a really good guest for your show. And, I could see he had a heart. He had a heart for a certain type of being on this planet more than anything. So I can't wait for him to tell you a little bit more about that. But welcome, Peter.
Oh, Heather, thanks so much for having me on. It's my pleasure to be on today.
So where are you right now in your leadership journey?
Well, right now I'm in Minnesota in my leadership journey, and we're launching an incredible franchise called Pet Evolution. It's based here in Minnesota with 2 stores that have been around for 9 years. And we really are the ambassador of health and wellness for dogs and cats. And in just 4 short months, we've sold 7 regions across the country and 9 additional licenses here in Minnesota.
That is amazing. And so your time then, tell us, why did you decide to go into this? Because you saw it, you decided to, really embrace it as you saw what these 2 gentlemen had done when they created the company. What was it about it that you were really taken by?
I first started out as a customer of Pet Evolution, and I've been in franchise development, Heather, for 20 years. I've helped develop brands like Massage Envy, the Amazing Lash Studio, a little boutique concept called Our Town America. And so I've been a customer of Pet Evolution. And when I walked in the door for the first time 4 years ago, I walked in the door and I thought, oh, this looks, feels, tastes. It acted like a franchise, not only in the branding and the way it looked, but the whole customer experience and how they approached me. And so when I asked and inquired about the fact, hey, are you a franchise? They told me, no, we're independently owned. It was like, it kind of, at that time, it was like, wow, that's really surprising. And then fast forward to about a year ago last summer, my 4th dog, a standard poodle by the name of Leo, was going through all kinds of problems nutritionally with his wellness. And so I had remembered that Pet Evolution specializes in nutritional for dogs and cats. So I brought Leo in. A woman by the name of Kylie took me under her arm, and she educated me on really the difference between feeding your dog properly with good food versus not. And it started with that.
Oh, it's so interesting how obviously it's personal. And I think about just what you're talking beforehand on the pandemic and how animals have become such a center point, particularly, I know now, but I think about the first, 6 months or so, people really flocked to find animals. You couldn't find them anywhere you tried to go. And then of course the prices were high when you found them. It was just crazy. So I don't know, what are you seeing in that regard as it relates to, just making sure that the folks that are coming to you, how are they properly caring for them? Just, I don't know. I'd love to hear more about that view of the pandemic and animals.
The pandemic certainly had an impact on so many businesses across the country. And we had to change course a little bit because in Minnesota, where we're located, we had a 7-week shutdown. So our grooming and our dog wash services were shut down. We were deemed an essential business, though, because of our nutritional dog food. And what's really ironic is the people that bought our dog food from us for years and years and years continued to come into the store, because our gross revenue numbers year over year, comparing 2019 to 2020, were actually up slightly. And there's not many brick and mortar businesses that can say that. But we had talked earlier, Heather, and Morgan Stanley, everybody knows that investment bank, they have labeled this industry, this pet industry, as $100 billion industry. And you remarked on the pandemic. They've said that by 2030, it's going to be a $275 billion industry just from the pandemic and the explosion of dog ownership, dog adoption, and, cats and other pets too. But it has been an absolute explosion.
And of course, like I showed you, so that this is my show, so I can do this. But then I've
Yes.
got like a little creature right here. You see her? She's just
Yeah.
right next to me on the ground. I don't know. For anybody who watched the video and they want to see her, I have a dog. Her name is Alex. We just took her to get groomed yesterday, and of course, it's so funny. You go in there to do this is the thing that I can see why the business is an exploding one. You go in and you're like, I'm going to do the grooming. It's like $50, and you're like, oh well, actually, she needs this thing, so that's another like $20. And then you're like, oh wait, I think I need to
Right.
get this thing for her nails, and plus she needs to get treats, and she. And I'm
Of
just like, by
course.
the time I leave there, it's like $150. I'm like, what is happening here? But it's
Better.
because we do what we do for our animals.
No, they're our family. It's no different
They
than
are.
when, we brought our kids into Toys R Us and, whether we were shopping for a birthday party or something, and of course you were going to have to buy Johnny and Susie some kind of toy. It's no different when customers come into Pet Evolution, whether they're getting their dogs groomed, whether they stop at our luxurious dog wash, which, by the way, is the best in the country. Heather, you would absolutely love our dog wash. You walk
Drive
in,
her.
it's a glass room, 700 square feet, 5 to 6 COVID spaced tubs, beautiful tile basins. Our attendant walks the dog in, they get colored in, and we have these high pressure water picks, industrial dryers. I can have my Leo, who's a full grown, large standard poodle who's 70 pounds, in and out in 20 minutes.
Wow, that's so awesome. I love it. Well, I'm curious to know, we talk a lot on this show about leadership with heart, and leadership with heart really is, showing concern and kindness towards those who look to you for guidance. And in this case, do we think about the person who's a family member who's bringing in the animal, and maybe something's not right, or they're like digestive, the stuff kind of like you do as you presented with Leo.
Yeah.
What is the philosophy there about how you meet those people as they come into the door?
Our mission at Pet Evolution is really the wellness of dogs and cats, and making a difference with that. I was a perfect example of coming in with Leo, who was suffering with allergies. I had him on Apoquel. That's kind of the catch-all allergy med. He had a lot of what are called hot spots from itching. His eyes were goopy. He just was a mess. And so I tried some other things. I walked into Pet Evolution. I spoke to Kaylee. She took me by the hand and she said, Pete, your dog is like a wolf. They're pack animals. And what do wolves do? Well, they kill their prey and they eat a raw diet. That's the best thing you can feed your dog, is a raw diet. And for me, because of my lifestyle, I'm on the go. I own a couple different businesses. I knew that would be difficult for me. So I said, what do you have, in terms of it thawing and such? And I said, well, what do you have in a kibble? So she showed me 3 different kibbles. I ended up focusing on a brand called N&D. It's actually manufactured in Italy. And the number 1 ingredient in that dog food is deboned chicken. And then Kaylee went on to tell me, Pete, as a human, you could actually eat N&D dog food. And I thought, well, if COVID gets too rough and tough, I've got my N&D dog food to get me by. They're kind of like adult version of Scooby snacks. And I thought, this isn't so bad. Well, I started to see the change in Leo within 7 to 10 days. No more hot spots, got him off the allergy med. And all of a sudden his digestion was on track. And in 1 year, I haven't had one bout with that. So what it really did is it told me we need to bring this to the nation. We need to educate so many dog owners and cat owners that are struggling with their dog and cat's health because of improper nutrition. So that's a big part of our model, Heather.
How do you is there a consultative approach that you use for that? So like when someone's coming in and this issue's having, is there a way that you go about that discussion with them? Because again, this is as if it's a child. So
yeah,
this is a very important person, like it's a person, in so many ways.
Yeah, we talked offline about that. I mean, these dogs and cats are part of our family. And so each customer situation is a little bit different, right? Sometimes most of the time it's a lack of protein, and it's mostly, we've talked about, byproduct and filler. And when you hear the terms meal, all of our dog food is free of corn, wheat, soy, byproducts, artificial sweeteners, and colors. And so there's no junk in our dog food.
Wow. That's crazy. Well, I think that's amazing that you're doing that. I do. Now I've always thought about I've thought about doing that too, and then thought about the price. But then there's the price and the cost and you think about like the medical bills later on and all I know that's exactly what it would be with us. Like, are we
Yeah.
eating whole foods? Are we feeding ourselves right? Are we doing self-care? All the things we ask ourselves for as humans would be doing the same. I tell my kids, they don't understand, like she can get diabetes. She can get like she can have all this lots of the same things that
Right.
we get. And so we have to kind of watch out for what we're giving her, table scraps and blah, 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 all those things.
Well, the table scraps might, in fact, be the best thing you're giving them because it's
Good point, because it's whole food. You're right, because it's not
right,
or what is it? Not the kibble, but real human food. That's
right,
very interesting.
exactly.
And they've always told you not to do that. Although is it, with the seasonings and the this and that, I'm sure that's probably not the best, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, like, if you're firing your dog wheat thins and those kind of things, probably not so good in chips and whatnot. But if it's like, chicken that isn't heavily seasoned or lamb or anything like that, obviously, again, raw food is the best thing for them. But
Hmm.
it's really interesting because I liken back to 25 years ago, and I'm kind of dating myself, but I think of Jane Fonda, starting the big workout regimen, and then there was Richard Simmons, and
Yeah.
all these different characters, but their hearts were in the right place, which is the synthesis of your show, in the sense that they were pioneers of wellness.
Mhm.
And so when we go back to that, and then we've seen what wellness does and how proper wellness is a great defense against cancers and other
Mhm.
illnesses. Well, guess what? It's no different for our animals. So here
That's
we
great.
are trying to educate on that component. And we grew up with things like Chuck Wagon and Games Burgers and this absolute rubbish. And I'm going to just throw it out there, Heather. I get it right out there. Probably in the 80s, 90s, we were told that science diet and IMS, and that's just great food. Well, no, it's not. I mean, if you read those labels and you become educated on what's inside that dog food, it is absolute garbage. And so what we are doing is we're revolutionizing this nutritional aspect for dogs and cats.
Oh, I love that. And as I think about, again, going back to this pandemic and all of the mental anguish and the mental health issues, and how the reason why people were bringing in dogs, because they needed that support system, and they wanted to have the emotional connection that maybe they were losing because we were in quarantine, and they just needed to have that connection. And we don't think about the role that our animals serve in helping us with our well-being. And I this you were like, this is the most unique show, because I've never had anybody ever talking about dogs and like how we show concern and kindness for dogs, right? That kind of thing. But it was just something that spoke to me, because I was like, you know what, I do know that's been reported a lot, and I can think about her, but I can think about another dog who, when from a well-being perspective, it's been like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to date myself, but let's just say it was some years ago, many years ago. I had
Yep.
a dog, and I remember one day I was like on my sofa and I was crying. I was just like, ugh. And she just walked up and started to lick my tears. And I knew right then that there was a connection. Like, I just knew that and I always thought of her as a human being anyway, because she would just like lay on the bed next to me. She'd look at me like, what? I'm not getting up. Like, she was a 90-pound Rottweiler Shepherd mix, and she would just be like, like a human. And
Right.
so, but I know that the what they bring to us in our lives, how much joy they bring to us, and just, so I'm curious to know, this is always something I always do. This is something I have to do at least at the end of the show, which is asking you, what might be a couple pearls of wisdom that you would leave our listeners with, particularly those that have animals. Okay. This is less like of a sales pitch and more of like, what do we do here to make sure that we're caring for them, but also that we care for their owners? Like, what are the unique ways that you think we can meet people where they're at? If even in the workplace, for example, there are people who don't have children, they have just animals, but the animals are like their families. How do you address that? And what might be a couple pearls of wisdom you might leave people with as they're thinking about what our conversation's been about?
First of all, you brought up a really interesting aspect with when you were really down and that Rottweiler came up to you and licked your tears. What we forget and take for granted is how unbelievable dogs are, particularly dogs and certainly cats too, about helping us as humans deal with stress. And during this pandemic, guess what? It was very stressful, not only from a social standpoint, but you know, let's say our kids who are going to school and our young adults going off to college, and all this stress was closing in on everybody. My brother, who's an adult therapist, was absolutely inundated with people coming in with all kinds of different issues. And I'll tell you what, we go back to the dog, and I go back to my days at Massage Envy when I learned about stress and how horrible stress is on your body because it emits an actual hormone called cortisol. It's a bad hormone. And that stress causes, things like illness and disease and mental anguish. And guess what? The dog is God's way of saying, you know what? Here's one of my unconditional servants, if you will, that is there to please you. And so, what can we do as humans to give back? We can feed them properly. We can give them proper nutrition. We can get them out and exercise just like our kids. Our kids have their gadgetry and they're sitting down playing video games and all that. Got to get out into the world. They got to get out and exercise. Got to get involved in team sports. No different with your dogs. Get your dogs out. Get them walking. Get them exercising. Get them to dog parks. That's how we can give back to them, Heather.
Yeah, I'm thinking too. There's this thing that when I start to rub her, because we are a very busy household. There's 6 of us now. There's 5 home because one's in college, but we're real busy. We can be really loud, and sometimes she's just like, "What?" It's just like over in her corner, laying in her bed. And what I would have noticed is when I go up, I'll have to just look at her, and of course her tail, because she knows like, oh, mom's coming in this direction. She's actually going to give me some attention. She's going to give me time. And then I start to rub her, and I immediately hear these noises. She makes these funny noises. I don't know if all dogs do this, but she does. She just makes these noises.
Yeah.
And it makes me realize the importance of touch and attention and connection, whether we're a human being, right, or a being on the planet. They still have needs. And so, for those who are listening right now, if you are someone that, I know this is a total off type of conversation we haven't had before, but when we think of well-being, we think of care, we think of connection and caring leadership. It still applies to those little animals that are walking around our home and how they touch us and how we touch them. And if you've enjoyed this episode, at being so unique as it is, please do share it far and wide. And don't forget to write a review on Amazon, on Apple Podcasts if you listen there, or wherever you do listen, actually, because we're all over the place. So wherever you listen, do a review. But Peter, this was great. It was awesome to learn more about your business, but also just feel the heart that you have for the work that you do and touching people's lives through their animals. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you, Heather. It was my pleasure being on your show, and I wish you all the luck, and your listeners and viewers, a tremendous 2021 remaining and into 2022.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And everyone, thanks for listening to the Leadership Heart podcast. Be well.